In the morning, an email from school arrived. A. Morales has been added to the authorized pickup list. I hadn't given consent. I read it twice. It was short, automated, like any message about lunch balance or schedule changes. The name was unfamiliar. Not a relative, not anyone I trusted. I did not call, did not write. If it was a mistake, I could apologize later. If it was not, I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. I noted the time, the sender, the subject. I took a screenshot and saved it in a dated folder. Then I opened our shared family calendar, school drop-offs, my night shifts, his off-site days. Everything looked ordinary. That made me pay closer attention. The image of someone I did not know standing in the pickup line, saying my daughter's name, made my stomach tighten. But I did not alert him. Questions tip people off. Silence collects answers. I added a line to my notes. School email, A. Morales added. No consent from me. At lunch, I checked our shared email account. Buried between dentist reminders and store promotions was an invoice from a downtown hotel. 2 guests, 1 king bed, his card. The date matched one of his late nights. I opened the receipt. Check-in at 8:40. Room service for 2, a bottle of wine, a note in the additional guest field, A. The last name was cut off, but the first letter was enough. I took screenshots, saved the PDF, and forwarded everything to my private email. A new folder, date plus docs. I did not confront him. I pictured his first reaction, the innocent confusion, the practiced, "What are you talking about?" and knew emotion would only blur what I had. Facts needed to stand on their own. I logged into the parent portal. No A. Morales listed there. Only me, him, my sister. The mismatch between the portal and the email meant someone had taken one step without the other. Another screenshot, time-stamped. When I picked up Lily, I stayed at the back of the line and watched. Staff checked badges, matched faces to names. Everything looked normal. She ran to me, talking about a library book. I listened, kept my tone even. I lingered by the school fence for a moment, pretending to check my phone. A few parents I recognized exchanged quick greetings as they walked past. A man in a gray suit, holding a slim leather folder, left without making eye contact with anyone. I memorized his license plate. Not because I knew who he was, but because in moments like this, I remembered everything. At home, I set her up with homework and reopened the laptop. The hotel email sat there at the top. I printed it and placed it in a plain folder with the date written in the corner. I set it on the shelf with appliance manuals. Easy to find, easy to see if moved. At 6:15, he texted, "Running late." The hotel check-in time was 8:40. I noted the gap. I made dinner. When he came in, he kissed Lily's head, talked about traffic, asked about school. He didn't notice that I didn't ask about his day. After Lily's bedtime, he scrolled on his phone while I rinsed plates. He went to shower. I added another line to my notes. Hotel invoice, 2 guests. Date matches late night. Simple, factual, something anyone could read without my voice explaining it. Before bed, I turned my phone face down and kept my thoughts short. If it was a mistake, I would admit it. If it wasn't, I wouldn't warn him. I would wait. And I wondered how much more would arrive if I stayed quiet. We had only just started to settle back into what looked like a normal routine. The mortgage payments came out on time. My night shifts lined up with his business trips, and Sunday dinners at his mother's house were back on the calendar. We sat at the long dining table while she asked Lily about school and handed me serving spoons like nothing had ever been strained. They talked about a family home for Lily, like it was a shared dream. His mother suggested adding her name to the mortgage as a co-borrower, saying it would get us a better rate. She made it sound generous, like a gift she was offering to secure our future. He agreed easily, telling me it was just a formality and that the bank would view her income as a positive. I told them I would read through any paperwork before signing. His mother smiled like she understood, but her eyes stayed fixed on me a moment too long. He reached for my hand under the table and gave it a light squeeze, the kind that was meant to calm me or to signal that I should play along. In the kitchen, while Lily and her cousins ran down the hallway, his mother spoke quietly to me about how interest rates were climbing and how we should act before the market shifted again. She repeated that it was for Lily's stability. She didn't need to convince me that stability mattered. What I didn't say was that stability and control aren't the same thing. That night at home, he brought up the co-borrower idea again, casual, as if it were still fresh in his mind from dinner. He mentioned how much easier the bank would be to deal with, how we could refinance in the future, and how it would lower the monthly payment. I told him I'd take the documents to work and review them on my break. He nodded, kissed me on the forehead, and changed the subject. At work, I kept replaying his tone from the night before. It was smooth, without the sharpness I'd come to recognize when he was pushing for something he knew I might resist. This was different. Measured, patient. That worried me more than anything. Later that week, he sent me a link to an article about co-borrowers improving credit scores and qualifying for bigger loans. I skimmed it and noticed that it didn't mention what happens if the co-borrower is not the primary resident. The omission felt intentional, like sending me the parts of a story that made it seem harmless. Sunday came again. Dinner at his mother's. This time, his sister brought a folder of listings for houses in better school districts. She said it was just for fun, to see what we could get if we sold ours and added a little extra from the bank. He laughed, flipping through the pages, making comments about bigger backyards and extra bedrooms. I stayed quiet, my hands under the table, gripping the edge of the chair. On the drive home, Lily fell asleep in the back seat. He talked about one of the houses from the folder, describing how we could turn the extra room into a study for me, how Lily could have her own bathroom. His voice was light, selling a vision. He didn't notice that I wasn't answering. While he was still talking, I quietly opened the Notes app on my phone and wrote down the date, his exact words, and the way his mother had looked at me during dinner. Steady, unblinking, like she was checking whether I understood my role. It was the same expression she'd worn years ago when I told her I was pregnant, as if it was her responsibility now to manage what came next. When we got home, I told him I was tired and went straight to bed. I lay there listening to him move around the kitchen, open the fridge, close cabinets. Every sound felt deliberate. I thought about the school email and the hotel receipt, sitting in my folder. Both were evidence of something bigger than a mortgage plan. But this new in glee, getting his mother's name tied to the property, wasn't about romance or betrayal. It was about structure, about positioning. The next morning, he left early for a meeting. His coffee mug was rinsed and placed upside down on the rack, like he was being careful not to leave signs of rushing. I opened my email and saw a message from him with the subject House Docs. There were 3 attachments: loan estimates, co-borrower agreements, refinance projections. all clean, all neatly formatted, all ready for a signature. I downloaded them, saved copies to my private drive, and printed a set for the folder. I noticed the way his mother's name was placed on every document, equal to his, right under mine. That night, I acted normal. Dinner, homework with Lily, a brief talk about his day. I didn't ask questions. I didn't touch the documents. They stayed in the folder with the hotel bill and the screenshot from the school. I knew this wasn't just about getting a lower interest rate, and I knew I couldn't say that out loud yet. After the mortgage conversation, I noticed changes I could not dismiss as coincidence. His phone, which used to sit face up on the counter, now stayed in his pocket or face down within arm's reach. The lock screen showed only the time, never a preview of messages. He said it was for work privacy, but work had never been private before. One evening, while he showered, I walked past his laptop and saw it asking for a password. He had never locked it before. I didn't try to guess it. I just stood there long enough to realize the change was deliberate. He started taking video calls late at night on Sundays, claiming they were for international clients. The sound of his voice was low, almost careful, and he always wore headphones, so I could only hear his side. I would catch phrases like, "I'll make it work, and that's the plan," before he shut the office door. The taxi app we both used for work trips sent notifications for completed rides. I no-tice charges for late-night trips to the same address, always after 11 p.m. At first, I told myself it could be a client's location. After the fourth one, I stopped pretending. It was random. I didn't confront him. I understood that a scene would only push him to cover his tracks better. Instead, I opened a new document on my private account and began logging every ride. Date, time, address, fare. One Thursday, while checking our joint credit card statement for a utility payment, I saw a receipt for a bouquet from a florist across town. The delivery address matched the taxi drop-offs. The order confirmation listed a first name, A, followed by the same surname, initial I had seen on the school email and the hotel receipt. I saved the receipt and added it to the folder. I included a screenshot from the taxi app, showing a trip to that address on the same day as the flower delivery. The pattern was no longer faint. It was clear enough to follow. Out of curiosity, I checked the florist's online gallery. One photo caught my eye, a bouquet arrangement with a visible date and timestamp in the corner. It matched the day and hour of one of his rides to that address. I didn't know if it was the same order, but the alignment was too perfect to dismiss. Sunday dinners continued. He still brought up the house documents occasionally, but with less urgency, like he was waiting for me to bring it up instead. His mother still asked about the family home in front of Lily, as if the idea belonged to all of us. I smiled politely, ate what was on my plate, and kept the folder in my mind like a locked drawer. One night, while he was on another client call, I went into the office to look for the paper copy of the taxi invoices. I didn't find them, but I did notice a small stack of envelopes from his work, unopened. I left them exactly as I found them. If there was something important inside, he would have to open it eventually. The following week, the late-night taxi rides continued, always to the same address, always outside normal working hours. I kept the notifications, forwarded them to myself, and logged them with the others. I knew the address wasn't random anymore. I typed it into the corporate directory search bar at his company. One name came up, A. Morales, project coordinator. No photo, but a department listing that matched his. I printed the page and slipped it into the folder with the flowers, the taxi records, and the hotel invoice. Each page was another weight in a file I didn't want to need but couldn't stop building. The next time he came home late, I noticed he didn't smell like the office or the gym. He put his phone face down on the nightstand before heading to the shower. When he returned, the phone was still locked. No previews, no banners, just the black screen. I kept my expression even, answered his questions about my day, and didn't mention the flowers, the taxi rides, or the woman's name. My silence was becoming its own tool. When I was sure he was asleep, I got out of bed, opened my laptop in the kitchen, and backed up the entire folder to an encrypted drive. I checked the time. 1:37 a.m. Another taxi notification lit up my phone. Completed ride, same address. I added it to the log without even needing to type the street name. By then I wasn't wondering if he was lying. I was only wondering what he was building with her and how it connected to the house he wanted in his mother's name. I decided the school email was where I needed to start. It was the first trace, the moment the pattern began. The next morning, after dropping Lily off, I called the front desk. I kept my voice even and asked who had added A. Morales to the authorized pickup list. The administrator paused long enough for me to know she was checking. It was submitted through the online form, she said. From the father's account, the system sent a confirmation email to his address. It wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. It wasn't jealousy or suspicion. Someone had taken an active step to give a stranger access to my child. I asked her to remove all contacts except myself and him, and to set a pin for release. She agreed and confirmed it would take effect immediately. I asked if she'd ever seen this woman in person. The line went quiet for a few seconds before she answered. I think so, but I'm not sure. Her voice had shifted, lower, more careful, as if she'd already said more than she meant to. When I hung up, I opened our joint email. The confirmation she mentioned wasn't there. It had gone only to his personal inbox. I added that fact to my log. I made a note to request my own login to the parent portal, independent of the shared AC count. That night, while he was in the shower, I changed every password connected to my accounts: email, banking, the parent portal, and enabled two-factor authentication where I could. If he was planning something, I wanted to be one step ahead. The next day, I called our bank. I asked about adding additional security on all AC counts that held Lily's savings or college fund. The representative walked me through adding verification steps that couldn't be bypassed online. I confirmed the changes twice before hanging up. After that, I focused on the number that kept showing up on his work phone. I had already logged 34 late-night calls to it over 2 months. I requested a full call log from the carrier and highlighted every instance of that number. It wasn't listed under a personal name, only the company's. But when I opened the corporate directory again and searched by extension, A. Morales appeared on the screen. Project coordinator? Same department as him. I printed the directory page and slid it into the folder with the taxi logs, the flower receipt, the hotel bill, and the school email screenshot. The following weekend, while he was out running errands, I checked the call log again. Another hour-long conversation with her number, starting at 11:45 at night. I added it to the record. I didn't alter my behavior toward him. At dinner, I asked about his day and helped Lily with homework. I didn't bring up the school change or the phone calls. On Monday, I asked the school to send me copies of any forms or requests made in his name that year. They hesitated, but when I told them I was confirming the accuracy of my child's file, they agreed. I added the request to my log so I would know the date it was made. Later that day, the package arrived from the carrier with the printed call records. I went through them line by line, matching dates to taxi rides and flower deliveries. The overlaps were exact. That night, after Lily went to bed, I opened my laptop and reorganized the folder. I created subfolders for each category: school, phone, travel, purchases. I wanted everything easy to access if I needed to hand it over. He came into the room while I was typing. I closed the screen halfway and told him I was working on my schedule for the week. He nodded and walked out. I waited until I heard the shower before opening the folder again. By midnight, I had finished compiling every contact point between them: calls, messages, shared locations, and the single official record from the school, linking her name to my daughter. It was no longer just a suspicion. It was a sequence. I shut the laptop, put the printed records in the folder, and placed it back in its spot on the shelf. I didn't lock it away. I wanted to know if he found it. The next morning, when I walked past the shelf, the folder was exactly where I left it. Either he hadn't looked, or he was better at hiding what he knew than I had given him credit for. After organizing the folder, I made my next move. I scheduled an appointment with a family lawyer I had worked with years ago on a minor property dispute. I didn't tell anyone I was going. In the meeting, I explained I wasn't filing for divorce yet. I wanted to know my options if things escalated, and what steps I could take to protect Lily without causing unnecessary chaos. The lawyer listened, asked for specific dates and names, and told me to start separating finances immediately. That afternoon, I opened a new bank account in my name only. I set it up with online access and opted for email alerts for every transaction. The first transfer was small, enough to get the account active without drawing attention. I also changed the settings on our joint accounts to send me notifications for any withdrawal or transfer. If he moved money, I would know within minutes. At home, I kept my behavior the same. I cooked, helped Lily with her projects, answered his small talk. But at night, after everyone was asleep, I worked on the folder. I printed the hotel receipts going back 6 months. I requested archived taxi statements and marked every trip to the same address. I matched them against his work calendar that he left visible on the kitchen corkboard. In one of the taxi invoices, I saw a ride to that same address the day after my birthday. He hadn't been out of town. He had told me he was working late. I added the date to the log without lingering on it. I also printed the company's official HR policy from their website. The section on relationships between supervisors and subordinates was clear: prohibited, grounds for termination. His title was listed above hers in the directory. 2 weeks after I opened my private account, a bank notification popped up. A security deposit for $2,800 had been paid from our joint account to a property management company. The lease start date was exactly 30 days away. I called the number on the transaction. The agent confirmed a rental agreement had been signed, but wouldn't share the address without the tenant's authorization. I didn't push, just noted the name of the company and hung up. In my log, I wrote, "Lease deposit, joint account, 30 days until start." It was the first concrete sign that he was preparing a move. I looked up the property management company online. One of their active listings was a 2-bedroom in a newer building across town. The floor plan included a small second bedroom that could easily be a child's room. I didn't know if it was the same unit, but seeing it made the rental deposit feel less abstract. That night, I made a copy of the lease payment receipt and put it in the folder. If he was relocating, I needed to know whether he planned to take Lily with him. In my mind, the pieces started to fit together. The apartment, for him and his new partner. The house, in his mother's name, so I'd lose control over my own home. And Morales, on Lily's pickup list, so she could be with them even if I resisted. This wasn't just an affair. It was the architecture of a life where there was no room left for me. The next Sunday, his mother mentioned the house paperwork again, casually, over dessert. She said she'd spoken to the loan officer and that things could move quickly if I was ready to sign. I smiled, told her I still needed to review, and changed the subject to Lily's school project. At work the next day, I called the lawyer again. I asked what it would take to keep Lily's residence fixed at our current address during any separation. She said it came down to documented stability, school records, home ownership in my name, proof of consistent caregiving. That evening, I backed up every school record I could access. I downloaded attendance logs, report cards, aftercare sign-ins. I also scanned the deed for the house, highlighting where my name appeared independently from his. When he came home that night, he seemed in a good mood. He talked about a big shift at work, how he'd be traveling less soon. I nodded, asked questions, and kept my face neutral. Before bed, I reviewed the folder again. It now contained screenshots of the school email, parent portal records, hotel receipts spanning 6 months, taxi logs with matching dates, flower receipts with her name, HR policy printout, lease deposit record, school and property ownership documents. I placed the folder back on the shelf and left the room. I didn't need to provoke him. I just needed him to believe I wasn't looking. The meeting with the notary had been scheduled weeks earlier, framed as a step toward finalizing the house plan his mother kept pushing. He told me it was just to review options before we locked in a rate. I agreed, knowing I wasn't there to sign anything. The office was small, quiet, with the smell of paper and coffee. He was already seated when I arrived, his mother next to him, a neat stack of documents between them. The notary greeted us, checked IDs, and began laying out the forms. The first document was a revised mortgage agreement. His mother's name was listed as a co-owner, not just a guarantor. The notary explained that in this arrangement, all decisions about the property would require both primary owners' consent. If one owner left the residence, the other could maintain control. I read the page again, slowly. In black and white, it meant that if we divorced, I would be in the minority on my own home. If I stayed, I'd be living in a house co-owned by him and his mother. If I left, I'd be leaving Lily in a property I couldn't control. The second document confirmed a new deed format, with both their names in equal position to mine. No safeguards, no clauses about primary residence or child occupancy. I flipped the page again, slower this time, not to reread, but to stall. There were faint pencil marks in the margins, numbers and initials that weren't mine. Someone had been through these papers before me, preparing them for a signature they assumed would happen. They watched me as I flipped through the pages. His mother smiled in that rehearsed, patient way, as if she knew I'd see the practical side eventually. He leaned back, arms crossed, not saying much. I understood now why he'd been calm about my delays. This wasn't about improving our finances. It was about locking me into a structure he could use later, and it fit with the deposit for the rental property, a place ready for him to move into while holding control over the house I lived in. I placed the pen back on the table. My hands didn't shake. I opened my bag and pulled out the folder. I laid it flat in front of him and slid it across the table. Inside were the hotel receipts, printed with dates and charges, the taxi logs with the repeated address, the flower orders with her name, the HR policy from his company highlighting the prohibition on relationships between a supervisor and a subordinate, the school email showing her added to Lily's pickup list, the phone call logs, 34 late-night conversations in 2 months. His expression didn't change immediately. He kept his arms crossed, then glanced toward his mother. She looked down at the stack of papers without touching them. "I'm not signing anything today," I said. My voice stayed low. I didn't need volume. The notary shifted in his chair, clearing his throat. He asked if we wanted to reschedule. I said no. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then he reached for the folder, flipped through a few pages, and stopped at the HR policy. He set it down like it didn't matter. His mother kept her hands folded in her lap. I picked up my bag, put the folder back inside, and stood. The notary reminded us to return the documents within 30 days if we wanted to proceed. I walked out without answering. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for a full minute before starting the engine. I wasn't shocked anymore. I wasn't even angry in the way I had been weeks earlier. What I felt was a confirmation. Everything I had suspected was now in plain sight. That evening, I said nothing about the meeting. Lily was in the living room, watching a movie. He came home late, moving quietly, avoiding the kitchen where I was. He didn't bring up the notary. The next day, there was no mention of the documents. No attempt to convince me. He acted as if the meeting hadn't happened. But I noticed the change in his eyes when he looked at me. Less calculation, more wariness. I called the lawyer again and gave her the update. She told me to hold my position and not sign anything. She also said the rental deposit's 30-day timeline meant I needed to prepare for a sudden move on his part. That week, I kept watching the accounts. Small transfers began appearing, amounts just under the threshold that would trigger a bank's automatic fraud alert. I logged each one. On Friday, I received an email from the school confirming the removal of all pickup contacts except myself and him. It also showed the date A. Morales had been added 2 weeks before the hotel stay in my first record. I printed it and added it to the folder. Sunday dinner was quieter than usual. His mother talked mostly to Lily. He barely spoke at all. When we got home, he went straight to the office and shut the door. By then, I knew there was no reversing the path we were on. He had set his plan in motion, and I had shown him that I saw it. What neither of us said out loud was that the next step would happen soon, and it would not be on his terms. A week after the notary meeting, the mediation notice arrived. It was formal but carried the same tone as his new silence. He wasn't backing away, just changing tactics. When we sat down in the mediator's office, he kept his posture loose, his voice calm. He opened with, "This is all a misunderstanding. We were just working together." He didn't look at me when he said it. I let him speak first. The mediator asked about our priorities. I told her mine. Stability for Lily, clarity about the house, a financial structure that didn't leave me dependent on his decisions. He glanced over at me, then back at the mediator. "I think we can work something out," he said, like he was the one offering generosity. I laid out my proposal. He would transfer his share of the house to me through a quitclaim deed. We would set fixed child support and a detailed custody schedule. His mother would be removed from any rights or claims to the property. I added one condition. If he agreed, I would not take the folder to his company's HR department. His jaw shifted almost imperceptibly, but he didn't protest. The mediator took notes and asked if we were ready to move forward. He said he'd think about it. Driving home, I remembered how, in our early days, he'd said he avoided fights and never saw the point in arguing. Back then, it had sounded like maturity. Now I understood. He avoided open fights, but he never walked away empty-handed. That night, after Lily was asleep, my phone buzzed with a bank alert. An attempted transfer from her college savings account. Two-factor authentication blocked it. I froze the account and called the bank's fraud department. They flagged the attempt and confirmed no money had left. The next morning, I emailed my lawyer, attaching the fraud alert and the account freeze notice. She said it was more than enough to support my request for sole control over Lily's financial assets in any agreement. 2 days later, I heard from a former co-worker who still had connections at his company. She told me, in careful words, that his relationship with someone in his department had become a topic of quiet discussion. She said the information hadn't come from me, but it was spreading. By the end of that week, I learned from another source that she, A. Morales, had been transferred to a different department. His title hadn't changed yet, but there were rumors that management had offered him the chance to resign quietly. When we met for the second mediation session, his demeanor was different. Less control in his voice, more clipped responses. He accepted the property transfer, the fixed payments, the custody schedule. He didn't mention his mother's name being removed from the house documents. He simply nodded when it was written into the agreement. We signed without apologies, without explanations. After the session, I walked out with my lawyer, the signed paperwork in my bag. I didn't look back. In the days that followed, there were no confrontations. The rental deposit he'd paid went to waste. No one moved in. The account activity slowed. He didn't ask about the frozen college fund. On Lily's birthday, he sent a short text about picking her up for dinner, but didn't follow through. A week later, I got a message from him asking about his rights under the custody agreement. I replied with a single line: refer to the signed terms. At school, the staff kept the PIN system in place. They confirmed there had been no further attempts to add new names to the pickup list. I checked every month anyway. One evening, I found Lily looking through old photos on the tablet. There were pictures of the three of us from years earlier. She asked why we didn't go to Grandma's house for Sunday dinners anymore. I told her we just do things differently now. She nodded and went back to her homework. A month after the final mediation, I heard through mutual acquaintances that he had left his job. No forwarding address, no public announcement, just gone from the company. I didn't know if it was by choice or not. I still kept the folder, updated with the signed quitclaim deed and the custody schedule. I didn't expect to use it again, but I didn't throw it away. We were no longer in active conflict, but the silence between us wasn't peace. It was a ceasefire. And I knew how fragile those could be. For 6 months after the mediation, life was quiet in a way that felt deliberate. He stayed within the custody schedule. Payments arrived on time. There were no more sudden bank transfers, no strange charges, no late-night taxi alerts. I kept my focus on Lily. School drop-offs, aftercare pickups, weekend library trips. I went to work, came home, made dinner. Sometimes I even caught myself believing the tension had settled for good. Now I understand that silence wasn't a truce. It was preparation. He'd been finding other ways to push. Through his mother, through my former friend, maybe collecting documents to make it look like I couldn't cope. He was waiting for the moment to strike, not head on, but from the angle where I'd be least prepared. It was a Monday when the envelope came. Thick, official, with the county court seal. I opened it at the kitchen counter and felt my hands tighten on the paper as I read. He had filed for full custody. In his petition, he wrote that I was emotionally unstable and that Lily would have better living conditions with him and his partner, who knows how to care for a family. There was no name listed, but I didn't need one. I scanned the witness list. His mother, his cousin, and Sarah, my former friend, the one I had once confided in about his affair. The hearing date was set for 6 weeks away. The paperwork demanded my response within 10 days. I set the stack down on the counter and stood there for a long time, feeling the same stillness I'd felt the morning of the school email. When Lily came into the kitchen asking about dinner, I slid the papers under a magazine. I told her we'd have pasta. That night, after she was in bed, I went to the closet and pulled down the storage box where I'd kept the folder. I laid everything out on the table. The screenshots, the receipts, the phone logs, the HR policy, the quitclaim deed, the custody agreement we'd just signed months earlier. I added the new petition on top. The contrast between the fresh paper and the older documents made it clear. He hadn't moved on. He'd just waited. I called my lawyer the next morning. She asked if I had evidence to refute his claims. I told her I had more than that. She set a meeting for the end of the week to prepare our response. Over the next days, I went through the folder again, making sure each document was in order. I labeled them by date, category, and relevance to the custody case. I printed duplicates of everything in case something went missing. I also requested updated records from the school, attendance logs, teacher notes, and report cards from the last 2 years. I wanted proof of Lily's stability in my care. The bank sent confirmation of the block transfer from her college fund, as well as account statements showing consistent deposits and no withdrawals since. I added those to the pile. The night before my meeting with the lawyer, I noticed a new friend request on one of my social media accounts from Sarah. I didn't accept it. I screenshotted it instead. When we met, the lawyer listened without interrupting as I went through the sequence. She flipped through the folder, nodding, marking certain pages with tabs. "We'll need to prepare for them to attack your work schedule," she said. "They'll argue you're not home enough." I pulled out Lily's aftercare records, showing that pickups were consistent and that I was the primary signer. I also had her activity forms, school trips, library cards, every permission slip with my signature. The lawyer said we'd respond firmly, attach exhibits, and request that the court maintain the current custody arrangement. She also suggested we ask for a clause preventing both parties from involving third parties in school matters without mutual consent. As we finalized the outline, I realized I'd been here before, sitting in a quiet office, preparing to prove I could protect my daughter. The difference was that now I had a full record, not just suspicion. Back at home, I kept my expression neutral when Lily asked about her dad. She said he had mentioned changes during their last visit. I told her nothing was changing yet. That weekend, I dropped her off at his place according to the schedule. A woman I didn't know opened the door, well-dressed, confident, clipboard in hand. She introduced herself as a friend. Lily ran past her to show her dad something from school. The woman watched me for a moment, then smiled, not warmly, but like someone who already had her opinion of me. As I got into my car, I saw her move to the window. She didn't wave. She just stood there with her phone in hand, holding it low but angled toward me, like she could have been filming without wanting me to be sure. Driving home, I didn't feel shaken. I just made a note in my phone. 8:14. Pickup. Woman at door. Identified as friend. The petition was more than an attempt to change custody. It was a statement. He wanted me removed from Lily's daily life entirely, and now I knew he was willing to stand in court and say whatever it took. That night, I placed the folder back in the box. This time, I didn't put it on the shelf. I kept it on the desk in my room. I was done waiting for the next move. The hearing was coming, and I intended to walk in with every piece of proof I had, in order ready to be read aloud if necessary. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, but the air inside felt heavy. The day before the hearing, my lawyer sent me the witness list from his side. There it was, the same friend who had opened the door at his place. Now she was officially listed as his partner. I realized her appearance back then hadn't been a coincidence. She'd already been preparing to play a role in his version of the story against me. I sat at one table with my lawyer. He sat at the other with his attorney. The woman who had answered the door at his place was there too, sitting close to him, a legal pad and pen in front of her. She looked like she was preparing for a meeting, not a custody hearing. When the judge entered, we all stood. The case was called, and his lawyer began. They painted a picture of me as a parent who was rarely home and unable to provide consistent emotional support. They emphasized my night shifts, my reliance on aftercare. Sarah took the stand first. She spoke with practiced confidence, saying I constantly complained about my life, that I was overwhelmed and unfocused on parenting. She avoided looking at me. Next was his mother. She described her home as a safe, stable environment where Lily thrived. She said it was only logical for her son to have full custody, with her helping to raise Lily. Finally, the woman with the legal pad testified. She introduced herself as his partner and said she had stepped in to provide structure and care when I could not. She talked about planning meals for Lily, setting routines, and helping with homework during visits. I listened without interrupting. My lawyer didn't push back much during cross-examination. She was waiting. When the judge turned to me, asking if I had anything to add, I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. I placed it on the table, opened it, and began laying out documents in order. First, the school email adding A. Morales to Lily's pickup list without my consent. Then, the parent portal record showing no such addition from my account. Next, the hotel receipts, multiple stays, 2 guests, dates matching his late nights. Then the taxi logs, all to the same address, with timestamps aligning with the receipts. I placed the flower order confirmations next, highlighting the delivery address and recipient name. Then the HR policy from his company prohibiting supervisor-subordinate relationships, with his title above hers in the corporate directory. I followed with the call logs, 34 late-night calls to her number in 2 months, then the lease deposit receipt for a property scheduled to begin just as he was trying to add his mother to our home's title. I ended with the fraud alert from the blocked attempt to transfer funds from Lily's college account, the signed quitclaim, deed from mediation, and the custody agreement he had already agreed to before filing this new petition. The judge went through the documents slowly, pausing at the HR policy and again at the school email. He asked a few questions about dates and whether I had independent verification for each. I handed over the backup copies with timestamps. While some of the evidence presented speaks to the relationship between the parents, several items are directly relevant to the child's stability and safety. Specifically, the unauthorized addition of a third party to the school pickup list, the documented attempt to relocate the child without the mother's consent, and the attempted withdrawal from the child's college savings account. These actions show a pattern of making significant decisions about the child's life without involving the other parent. That is not in the best interest of the child. His lawyer tried to object, saying the evidence was irrelevant to current custody concerns. The judge overruled. When I was done, I closed the folder and set it aside. I didn't add commentary. The judge spoke for several minutes, addressing both sides. He said custody would remain as outlined in the prior agreement. He added a provision that any visitation outside the schedule must be in the presence of a court-approved mediator. He also warned both parties against any manipulation or influence involving the child. The gavel came down. It was over. In the hallway, he passed close enough that I caught the scent of his cologne, the same one I remembered from the hotel invoices. I knew he caught the flicker of recognition in my eyes, because his pace quickened without him saying a word. He didn't look at me as we left the courtroom. His partner gathered her notes and walked ahead of him. Sarah avoided my eyes entirely. His mother stood by the hallway exit, talking quietly to his attorney. Outside, I waited for my lawyer to finish speaking with the clerk. I could see him across the plaza, standing with the woman, both of them speaking in low tones. Then they walked away together, without glancing back. A week passed. He didn't show up for Lily's school performance. There was no birthday card. Once, he sent a short message about reviewing the agreement, but he didn't involve his lawyer. I didn't respond. Lily didn't ask many questions. She seemed to accept the schedule as it was. I kept our evenings predictable: dinner, homework, stories before bed. She smiled easily, but I could tell she noticed the gaps where he used to be. The folder stayed on my desk. I didn't add to it. I didn't put it away either. It was no longer about preparing for a fight. It was about remembering what had already happened. One night, after Lily had gone to bed, I walked into the living room and stood in the quiet. The house felt different now, not because anything had changed in the walls or furniture, but because I knew exactly what it had cost to keep it ours. He had tried to take me out of her life completely. Instead, he'd removed himself. What would you do in my place? Please write your thoughts in the comments. I will be happy to read them.